Yeah, so the question is from Nate. He said, should you buy a house or what's your take on housing? And so I think I'll just talk to you about it, Nate, here. Like, we're obviously here, we're at beautiful Buds Beach here, and we've got all these beautiful houses behind us. The problem that people face when they buy houses is they buy it in the wrong way. So real estate's a wonderful asset because it's steady, it grows, it's very easy to understand, it produces income, it's not going to go out of fashion to have shelter. The problem is that when we do it at the wrong time or the wrong way, and unfortunately a lot of people, they go and get a house they can't afford, so they just bite off more than they can chew. So they get this massive mortgage, they're on only one income, and of course if they lose their job, they're in a lot of trouble, and they get into a position of massive financial worry. So no amount of money is worth worry. So if you're going to buy a property, make sure you've got a ton of cash, and if you can't afford a ton of cash, you may be looking at a property that's too expensive. So bring it back a bit, pare it down. You don't need to go and borrow a ton. Start smaller if you really want to be on the property ladder for investment purposes, or you want a home. But too many people go too big because they're trying to keep up with the Joneses, or they want to buy a house just because their friends did it, or they want, in Australia it's a rite of passage. As soon as someone buys a house, they put it on Facebook. We bought a house. It's a rite of passage for the modern family. And unfortunately, they're too much in a rush. So they'll put a small amount of equity in, they'll borrow a ton of money. And of course, if interest rates go to 10%, they're in a lot of trouble. And so the idea is to do it, but do it when you're ready. And you have to be in a rush. Yes, property goes up, but it doesn't go up 13% every single year. We're currently in a bit of a boom stage. That's not going to always be the way. It'll go through seasons, like any investment season. It goes up and it goes down and goes sideways. So don't be in too much of a rush. Just do it when you're ready, and make sure you've got a lot of cash, more than what you need, because you'll think you need X, but you'll need X plus 2. There's a lot of hidden costs with property that you don't realize. So if you can't really put it together, and it doesn't make a lot of sense from a cash flow standpoint, maybe you can, what you were talking about, Nathan, where you can Airbnb the back side and live in the front side. So get a bit of a dual occupancy going with your house. Set it up that way so you've got more cash flow coming in and someone can help you pay the loan. Or if you buy yourself, maybe get some roommates in to pay off the mortgage with you. You've got to look for unique, clever ways of producing more cash flow from the property than what it's going to take. So when property is expensive, like it is now compared to earnings, so it's now 10 times earnings or 8 times earnings to buy a house. It used to be 3 times earnings because interest rates were very high, so the demand for money and debt was low, so asset values were low. But that was why people made a lot of sense to buy property. But now it's different. Now you've got to get a lot of money against your income to buy property. So you got to do it a little bit more cleverly by getting cash flow. So some of my students in one of our mentorship programs, they're putting industrial sheds on their property to develop income, or they're putting a tiny house and developing Airbnb income to get more income from the asset. So that's how you got to do it. You got to do it in that clever manner. Or just wait and build up a ton of cash equity and go into the property with way more equity. And that way, if interest rates do shift or your job situation changes, you're not grasping at straws. Because of so many people have messaged me on Instagram asking me about housing, and they've got this property and they've either lost their job or they've had a change in their financial circumstances and they now can't sleep. No amount of money is worth worrying. It's just not. Because we're only here for 85 years. Like, what's the point in worrying for 40 years if you're 85? Like, just to own pieces of bricks and some housing. Like, and your kids, oh, I want to leave it for my kids. Well, they'll probably sell it. I just don't think that your whole life should revolve around buying pieces of bricks and some tin or some wood. It should be about timing. It should be about lifestyle. It should be about cash flow. There's so many more opportunities out there to buy small businesses that return far better than property that will change your lifestyle and change your financial situation than a piece of real estate. There's businesses out there you can buy for 1/5 of the price that produce just the same amount of income, So it's more important to have a business income or multiple streams of cash flow than it is to buy a house. Because when you buy a property, typically you're banking on capital gains. And the unfortunate thing with capital gains is you only realize them when you sell. And for most people, if they get a lot of borrowings to buy a house, which is what they do now, like these properties around here, these ones here, multi-million-dollar houses, and even these units here, these apartments are multi-million-dollar apartments. You've got to get, $1.5 million, $2 million worth of debt to buy them. And if you rent them out, the rent payments will not cover the mortgage repayments. After costs, they won't. And so you've got to think to yourself, like, what am I going to do? Am I going to get myself in a position where I've got negative cash flow? Long time, not enough equity. You've bitten off more than you can chew. Wrong time, and you're not in a clever position to get more cash flow from it. So it doesn't make sense to buy property when you're trying to do that. Just to keep up with the Joneses, just because your friends are doing it, just because your parents said to do it, and they said to do it when housing was 3 times earnings. So what worked for them may not work for you, because property may not double in the next 10 years now. It's just gone through a huge boom from the cheap money that was around at very low record interest rates. So to say that some of these apartments here are $2 million to buy, who's to say that someone on any income can buy a $4 million apartment in 10 years? Because wages do not creep up the same way that properties do. So you'll get to this point where it'll be cost prohibitive for people to even buy houses. So you've got to be more clever. My sister's been sending me properties in Oslo and Europe and some other places, and if you have to change where you live and shift where you live, a friend of mine just moved to Croatia recently, there's far more opportunity in property in different areas of the world, not just Australia. It is very expensive in Australia to buy property. It's not the only place. You can also get exposure through property from real estate investment trusts on the stock market. You can get exposure to a group of commercial properties, and you can just buy it like a stock if you want exposure. But people do love leverage. They like to buy a property, put equity in, and then leverage it. And that's where they get a lot of gains. But you only realize the gains when you sell. And unfortunately, a lot of people only sell when they're like 65. So all that lifestyle they could have experienced is spent worrying about a mortgage. So does real estate work? Of course, only when it's done the correct way, and too many people are in too much of a rush. So cool your jets. If you have a house that is just not serving you and it's negative equity and it's causing you a lot of sleepless nights and you're just like worried 24/7, then sell it. Get rid of the problem. Drop down a cog and rent again and start again and build up a different buffer. Start a business. There's more than one way to skin a cat when it comes to building wealth. And residential property, I don't feel is right now the best way unless you have a lot of cash to put in a good deposit and you're prepared to hold it for a long period of time. So when you buy, don't sell it. But if it's causing you a lot of problems, perhaps selling it is the right idea.